start by introducing our panel today. So I'm going to start with you, Sita. In fact, I'm going to get people to introduce themselves because that's a far better way to do things. So I'm going to start with you, Sita. If you could introduce yourself, please.
I'm Sitarakumar. I run Screen Skills, which is the industry-led skills body. We work to train the people who make films and TV in the UK the whole world loves. And in doing that, we try to build access and inclusion at every step of the skills pipeline. The reason I feel so strongly about doing so is I worked in a previous life as a program maker, and I've also worked across new technology and digital, and I've also worked in vocational education. And it feels to me that if we can truly invest in how we build pathways up and embed inclusion at every step of the way, then we will do what we say we want to do, is have an inclusive workforce.
Thank you, Sita. Wilma, would you like to go next?
Thank you. My name is Wilma. I'm the Associate Director for People Strategy. That includes talent, inclusion, culture, and change for University of the Arts London, world's #2 university on arts and design, offering a range of courses on all areas of the creative industries, creative endeavor. I'm also a trustee of Creative and Cultural Skills, a sector skills body that at its heart is about opening up access to the arts and to the creative industries for people from every background.
Thank you, Wilma. And Stephen?
Hi, Julie. My name is Stephen Leach. I'm the Director of Diversity and Inclusion, People and Culture for the Walt Disney Studios. Really, our charge at the studios is quite simple. We want to be able to create compelling, inclusive, really relatable content for audiences all around the world. And part of my team's role is to partner closely with our creative leadership across the studios, and really making sure that we have proper representation, both in front of the camera, if we think about what's on screen, but also thinking about what's happening off screen as well, and really making sure that we're being deliberate and intentional about bringing underrepresented voices and these stories to our audiences. So really excited to be part of the conversation today.
Thank you, Stephen. And Katie?
Hi, yes, I'm Katie. I'm a production manager in High-End TV here in the UK. And I'm also co-founder of a campaign called Underlying Health Condition, which campaigns for better disabled access within the UK TV industry. And of course, better access means better on-screen and off-screen representation. So lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Katie. So when we briefed our esteemed panel about what we'd be talking about today, we said, when it comes to diversity, do we have initiative itis? And what we really want to hear about is what's really working to shift barriers for diversity and inclusion across the creative technology industries. And also, let's talk about what else can be done. So let's start with a question about, we know there are many different sectors where the lack of diversity is still hugely problematic. But what do you see as the main challenges across the entertainment production industries still now? Katie, I'm going to start with you on that one, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I would say one of the biggest challenges is the quick turnaround and tight deadlines and the freelance nature of our industry. So often people can be offered employment with just a couple of days' notice and actually not that far in advance. And that's really hard. It's a really hard network in which to operate to then offer assistance to people who maybe, I don't know, don't live nearby and can't afford to accommodate themselves, or have access requirements, or have caring responsibilities. There's many barriers that the nature and the speed at which the industry can work, that those barriers present to a lot of people. And I would say probably that the immediacy and the pressure is one of the biggest.
And Wilma, how do you think that impacts sort of students just graduating from university and coming out into the industry? How do you think that impacts them, that sort of, quick turnaround nature of what we do?
We know that it does, and there's some unhelpful sort of myths out there that younger generations kind of don't value things like security, stability, good line management, you know, all of the, you know, a decent contract, which we actually know that they do. But I would say the impact starts a lot earlier. From school and from family and the expectations around what good employment looks like. In my family, good employment meant stability, meant that you will have a contract and a salary and sick pay, and anything outside of that, I think my parents would really have struggled to even encourage me to consider a creative endeavor.
Thanks, Wilma. And Sita, from your point of view, what do you think are the main challenges across the industries?
I'd say the biggest challenge is that it is still, and it's in your question, Julie, initiative-itis, because the more initiatives you have, it's not woven into the mainstream. I've worked in this industry a very long time, and I have seen so many initiatives come and go. They always start at the entry level. And I always think, what about the people who got in, believed, hoped, and then they were literally let go, jettisoned? There aren't enough role models at the mid to senior level, enough people to make you believe, despite it being project-based and freelance, because there are other people who navigate that, but people who come or who are inclusive, somehow it is harder because we still have hiring practices that are quite insular. We still have a tendency to hire people we know, mates, and I'd say, and this is quite telling, that somebody like me who's worked in the sector, who's doing the job I do, even today, I can feel invisible.
Stephen, what do you think about that?
Wow. I agree with my fellow panelists and such powerful statements there. I think really for me, in my experience, it comes down to two things. And several have sort of keyed in on these items. One is awareness. I think when we think about underrepresented communities, I think particularly young people, there's not a lot of awareness around this industry and what types of opportunities are available. I think many times young people just see actors, what's on screen, they see writers, maybe directors, maybe producers, but not beyond that. I think there's a big lack of awareness about the numerous career opportunities and the numerous things you can do within this industry. And I think the second thing, and many just spoke on this, Sita just spoke on this, is access. I think many times these underrepresented communities, even if they have an understanding of the industry, it's still difficult to break in. It's still very much, it's knowing somebody. You have to know somebody that knows somebody to get into the industry. And I think that creates a challenge for a lot of our young people, particularly those that come from underrepresented, undervoiced communities.
Thanks, Stephen. And Katie, it was sad to hear Sita say that sometimes she can still feel invisible. What is that like for people who have come from the disabled community? How does that feel? How does that impact you?
I mean, I am a permanent electric wheelchair user, and obviously that comes with its complications. What I would say is that for people starting out in the industry, and going back to what all the panelists have said, I came to the industry not knowing anyone at all, and I genuinely to this day don't think my family know what I do. I think they think I just sort of like float around on set and slightly say no all the time. And I think what invisibility and not feeling heard and not feeling supported is something that happens to a lot of disabled people day in and day out, and a lot of people who represent difference and represent what this industry isn't necessarily used to seeing and working with. And it has an impact. But what I would say, and what I do try and say to people who I meet who maybe want to start out in the industry and want some advice and need a bit of mentoring, is you can get there. And there really are people and organizations who are willing to help you and to help that change. But I think certainly for the disabled community, the needs are often a bit more complex, and sometimes you just need that extra voice and that extra person going, you know, when I send around a deal memo for all crew, because you don't work without paperwork, I ask one very simple question. Do you have any access needs or require any reasonable adjustments to do your job? Now, for 99% of the people that I send that email to, they will probably likely not have any. But for the 1% that has an impact with, it will make a huge difference. And I think there are more and more people in the industry working like in that way, really trying to bring about that change. And as Sita said, you know, to weave inclusion into everything that we do. And so, you know, it's difficult, but I really am so hopeful that it is changing. And the more, you know, the more young people we get working in this industry, the more I hope to see that change.
Thank you. So Stephen, every time I have a conversation with anyone from Disney or anyone else we work with, we talk about the skills shortage in the sector. That there aren't enough people. We just can't get enough people through the door and train enough people to do the job. Do you think that that's likely to have a positive action on us creating a more diverse culture and more diverse workforce within the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could, but only if those communities that we're describing are able to get the resources needed to build that skill set. I think if we, you know, there has to be deliberate and intention. And Katie, you just hit the nail on the head. You said you yourself go and ask the question, and you know, send out a questionnaire for folks to be able to fill out. That's intentionality. That's being very deliberate and intentional about these efforts. This diversity is not going to be something that just happens by happenstance. It's not going to be something that just happens, you know, from folks sitting on their hands. There has to be deliberate and intentional effort to provide those skills, to provide the resources necessary, or we're going to end up in very much where we are today, in the same place we are today.
Wilma, do you think it's when you and I have worked together? I know that sometimes people are scared to call it out, to actually take direct action, as you mentioned, Katie, because people don't want to get it wrong. They don't want to offend anybody. They're scared about what they can say or what they can't say. You know, how do we make sure we do that, kind of really kind of putting it out there without making people feel nervous that they're saying the wrong thing?
I like Sita's vision of kind of holistic interventions. This isn't just about an initiative. If you started sort of how we 90% of workforce conversations around diversity start with, we need an internship scheme, or we need a positive action scheme for this or that, and we need all of these things, but they are initiatives. So so I like the idea of kind of really addressing or attacking this from every possible angle, at leadership angle, at role modeling, at governance, at decision making, accountability, budgets. I always, people look to me for answers to diversity. And I always say, look at the finance director, look at where the money is being spent. They have as much power, actually more power. The IT director, about how we set up the technology, the stage people, how we build our buildings. So all of this is really important. So I think the conversation needs to be widened beyond the diversity experts.
I think what I'd like to say is the way we do it, and obviously I will say that, because we don't put diversity or inclusion on the periphery. We mainstream it. And by that I mean, whatever we do, any skills intervention, because if you step back, ours is an industry that's disrupting constantly, technologically, creatively, and financially, business model wise. So with every time you teach someone to step up, progress, you build an inclusion, any intervention you do. And I use intervention to mean a basket of things. It is the stepping up, the placement, the mentoring, the bursaries, which can be transformative. You make sure that you actually provided what a person needs to step up and progress and for them to remain in the industry. If every step of the way you do that, then inclusion is woven into the fabric. People will just progress. So we do that. But the one thing is, with the skills gaps and shortages, there's obviously, on the positive, a lot of focus put on skills. For me, that's like a breath of fresh air. The last couple of years, a lot of focus put on inclusion. That is a breath of fresh air. The key is, are we going to put enough time and investment? Because if you've come from a challenging background, you are literally trying to compete with people who've had years of polish. You will need to provide the scaffolding and support. And a risk of the skills gaps and shortages is people, and Katie knows this, especially in mid-tier, can be promoted too quickly. And once you stumble, who's going to help you pick yourself up again? So I think we got to use the opportunity, but we got to use it wisely if we really want change to happen.
So, Stephen, how do we really nurture people and develop people so that when they do come in, as Sita said, they might be working with people who've got so much more experience or have gone to the right school, so they get polished before they kind of come out of the doors. What can we do to support them when they do join us?
It's in investing. You have to invest. And when I say invest, I mean financially. I mean, provide mentoring, provide wrapping your arms around. I mean, there has to be an active investment in this next generation in order to build that skill set for those leaders for the future. It has to be sustainable. It has to be something that's done over time. It can't just be a one-off. Let's invest in this organization. Let's get a couple of fill in the blanks to come into our company, and that's it. It has to be something that we continuously and do from sustainably. I remember back in the fall here in the United States, back in the fall of 2020, a lot of companies, just about every company, given the things that were happening here in the U.S., they all decided we wanted to support underrepresented communities, and they wrote checks, and they were able to support a lot of communities and a lot of organizations. And they wanted to make this statement that diversity was important to him and to them. And certainly that was a great gesture, but it has to be something that you continue over time. It can't be a one-off. It has to be something you're continuing to invest in, and you have to take additional actions in order to fully support this work. So,
Katie, when have you seen it working really well?
I have seen it working really well when, going back to Stephen's point, like people invest more than money. They invest time and care and and mentoring. But it's the times where it works best is when you have it from the top down. So when your leadership team and your senior management and your creatives are invested and on board, and it happens from the get-go. And we talk about this with every layer of inclusion, and including disability. You can only work out if you can get a wheelchair using actor to set if somebody's thought about it months ago to get them an accessible trailer and an accessible unit car and then an accessible makeup trailer. It's thinking about it from the offset, and it's investing that time, because I think, as Sita and Stephen point out, a lot of young people that work in the industry today who haven't had that polish need that extra support. They need that time and they need that understanding. And it can be as simple as sitting down with a production assistant and saying, "How are you today? What's going on? How are you feeling?" And they will open up and say, "Actually, you know what? I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I'm feeling this, and I don't know if I'm doing this right." And actually, they're surrounded by people who come across as so confident and so sure of themselves that it's even more intimidating for them, and they can get even more overwhelmed. And I think when you have a leadership team who invests that time and the money, but more the time and the care, the rewards can be phenomenal.
Huge.
Mm-hmm. And Sita, where have you seen it working well?
I would say some of the interventions we do working in conjunction with, whether it's people entry level or people mid-tier, because what's brilliant is when you can actually help them understand, if you're at entry level, what a production set looks like, what do you expect, what is the pastoral care they might benefit from, they thrive. And the other thing is you can help them build networks, because it's not just the network in terms of your employer, but the network you build as a community with other whether it's a trainee or if you are stepping up and it's a bespoke intervention, colleagues like yourself, because ours is a relationship industry and we all have to problem solve and work our way to. So the more people you can connect with, the more people you can help with, a safe space for people to progress. And I think all of that care and thought is important. The other end is making sure that the employers you work with, the leaders you work with, are aware of the tools they can use, leadership management, unconscious bias, being aware and challenging themselves. I think those are the sorts of things. So that's what we do. We've had a lot of success because I believe in, as I said, mainstreaming inclusion, not putting it in the periphery. But I think, we've made progress, but there's so much more to be done. If we truly, truly want to be an accessible, equitable, inclusive, fair industry.
And Wilma, quite often people bring in the experts. So they'll bring in maybe people like Sita and Screen Skills, or they'll bring in a diversity company to come and make it happen. That's an initiative, if you ask me, that's initiative-itis. I'm not saying you don't do great work, but I mean, sometimes people buy in expensive resource to do diversity at an organization. So how do you avoid doing that and actually make diversity and inclusion a core part of business as usual within an organization?
I mean, I'm in awe of the work that Sita has been doing. So if I was lucky enough to kind of, bring somebody like her, and I'm sure Katie, you do similar work as well. It's amazing when you bring catalysts in the organization and people that change the discourse and challenge in a way that there's other reasons why people don't apply to come into our industry sometimes, and that's because they haven't been traditionally very inclusive industries. They haven't had people haven't had the tools or the power to challenge and all of that. So bringing the expert in works. I think the key thing for me is that as an organization, I would say this because I'm an organizational development sort of practitioner, as much effort as you put into supporting and nurturing the talent that you want to bring in, as much, and if not more, you need to put into changing the organization, because bringing in diverse cohorts into an organization that is always going to do things like they did before isn't going to happen. It isn't going to help. You're going to break these people, or these people will very quickly get the message that we're going to have to be like XYZ to survive here. So for me, it's how do we change the structures and the culture in the host organizations, which is where a lot of the emphasis, and people get a bit thrown when I say this. They look into, but we need to do all these activities for these, and it's like, no, as a host, you need to change.
Julie, can I just jump in? I think just to clarify, we are the glue or act as the connective tissue for a freelance project-based sector. So we work with employers who are temporarily employing a person, but we are not sort of someone who comes in, torpedoes into an entity, because obviously our sector really well. There are some that have full-time employees, but the bulk of production and some post-production is actually freelance and project-based. So we are the one who actually provide the continuum for them.
Brilliant. Thank you for clarifying that, because I think I sounded like I didn't think it was a good thing, you coming and working with people, and I think it's amazing and fabulous. So Stephen, how do we, thinking about going back to Disney for a second, how do we make sure that kind of cultural awareness, that kind of embedding it in as business as usual, how do we make sure that happens so it doesn't feel like, you use the word a gesture and we've used the word initiative a lot.
Yeah.
How do we make sure it's not just that?
I will say, when I joined the studios, this is the first time in my career that my role did not roll up into HR. Every role I've had, and I've been in the D&I space and the corporate social responsibility space for over a decade. But one of the things about where my team is structured is that we're not part of HR. We work closely with our HR partners, both in talent acquisition and talent planning, in learning with our HR business partners, but we are a part of the business. And I think that uniquely positions my team to be there at the table when decisions are being made about the types of movies that we're going to greenlight, about the types of characters that we're going to bring to the forefront, about the types of storylines that we're going to lean into. And that, I think, is a big consideration when you're thinking about this work, is we are tied in with the business and are there at the table as these decisions are being made. And again, that just uniquely positions us to be able to have the influence that is needed in order to truly move the needle in this work. I tell people all the time, I'm trying to work myself out of a job. I don't want our team to even be in existence. I want this to be a part of the fabric of our studio and really the fabric of the industry. And we know that there's a lot of great things that we've done up to this point, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And I'm hoping to get to a point where our team isn't even needed because those conversations and those decisions are happening at the table without us even there.
Do you really believe that you're going to have no job anytime soon, Stephen?
Not even, Julie. I think I'm going to be around for a while. I think I'm going to be around for a while. There's a number of challenges within this industry that we're battling against, and I think we're gonna be at this for some time. Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about the kind of skills pipeline, i.e. people kind of coming in new to the industry, but what can we do? Are there practical things that we could do to sort of shift the lack of diversity across that talent pool? Katie, have you got any thoughts on that?
Oh, I have many thoughts. I think the single most powerful thing that people can do is start to widen their talent pool. And I mean this in one of two ways. Firstly, the ringing of mates, or the ringing of mates who work with somebody and they really like, is one of the most frustrating elements of our industry, because I think there's a level of resistance to working with somebody that you haven't worked with before, which is crazy because you're freelance. You work with people you've never worked with every single job. But there is this resistance within their team, certainly from heads of department, to branch out. And I think that is fundamentally one of the biggest problems, because again, not only do you find great people, but you also get to meet great people. And the more diversity you have within your team, the more diversity they then bring. So talking to a head of department to bring in the supervisor, and what's happened in the UK, certainly over the last few years, are the existence and establishment of some amazing groups, some amazing talent databases that people voluntarily are part of, to show that they come from another background or a sector of society that is traditionally overlooked. And that's brilliant. And I think the ability to reach out to those networks for them to then, do the shout out for jobs is brilliant. But there is still this mentality of, oh, but I know this person and they said that this person's really good. And you have to sort of pull it back and say, well, actually, that's great. And we can consider them, but you should also consider meeting these other people, because they might just be even better. You just haven't met them yet.
And yeah, sticking with that skills pipeline thing, Wilma, is there more we can do at the sort of schools and college level to actually encourage people to join the industry, to be part of those sort of creative conversations?
I have personal experience of this. I do something called Enterprise Advisor, which is a scheme where any of us can be matched with with a secondary school, certainly in the London area, but it happens across the country, and work with their careers provision. So and work either tactically, on an event. I can bring in contacts to speak to young students. I work with an FE college at the moment, or more strategically around how they develop their careers provision. We're working a little bit against the grain, because there's a massive push, certainly in this country, in secondary education towards the STEM subjects, science, technology, and maths. which is a good thing. And it's more difficult to get traction with arts related or creative subjects. So I have to be very creative in how I position these careers, these industries. Whereas if you said accountancy in PwC, parents want to come to the event, children want to come to the event, interview practice with these people. So there's definitely schools and secondary education. I think there's a lot more work to be done there.
And what's it like in the States from that point of view, Stephen?
I can't agree more. I think, Wilma, you hit the nail on the head. I think if there's an opportunity for us to convince parents earlier on that there are real career opportunities within this industry, I think many minority parents, they want you to learn a trade. They want you to be in a less risky industry. I think a lot of what you described, Wilma, is absolutely true. My personal experience, my dad was pushing for me to be pre-med. He wanted me to be a doctor because that's a solid industry and a really, competitive job and that whole thing. I remember calling him from college and letting him know that I was majoring in psychology with a minor in women's studies. I mean, he was horrified. What are you going to do with that degree? Like, what are you going to do with that? So I think, being able to even create greater education for parents early on about opportunities within this industry and how you can build a strong, solid professional career is one of the key pieces that we see here in the States.
And do you think, Wilma, I was going to ask Sita. Sita, do you think that it's about educating the parents? Is that really, really important, do you think?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with what Stephen and Wilma said. I think it's about educating the parents, but more critically, the careers advisors, because they quite often are the gatekeepers. And I mean, if you look at our industry, we on our website, and do have a look, we have 200 job role summaries and career maps. We spend a lot of time in schools. We spend a lot of time training careers advisors, helping them understand the breadth of jobs that exist in our sector, that actually accountant doesn't mean just PwC, that you can actually have quite a cool job working in film and TV and make quite a lot of money. But there is much, much more work to be done. And alongside, Stephen, your point about parents feeling a sense of insecurity, I come back to the role models, because we do need to educate and evangelize the breadth of job roles, and it's a very exciting sector, and it is creativity and STEM, because we're getting more technology is changing a lot of workflow and practices. But I think you also need to them feel that if their child does get in, they will stay in and won't be spat out. So I think that's something we also need to do to change the culture of how we work. So it's two-pronged, I would say.
I agree.
We've talked a lot about kind of new people coming into the industry, but what about established people? Sita, I'm going to keep repeating it. You said sometimes you feel invisible, and I'm trying to drive something through here, which is about bringing your real self to work, so that you can just be who you are at work, and you don't need to kind of have any kind of other persona, etc. But what couple of things do you think would really make an impact for people who are in the industry but still don't feel that they're represented for whatever reason? Katie, what do you think about that?
I would say my biggest thing at the moment is the ability to job share. So our industry loses an awful lot of talent to new parents, especially women with young children. And I spend a lot of my time talking about the possibility of job sharing with people, because that is a massive, they call it brain drain on our industry, where people step away to have a life and then want to try and come back. And that can be really challenging for them. So I would say that job shares is something that can be really brilliant for those at mid-level. And I also think as well, there needs to be a greater understanding, a greater acceptance that everybody has lives. Everybody needs to buy houses and go on holiday and go to funerals. I only say that because I just came from one. But this all needs to happen. And I think that on my current production, we built a welfare room. It cost we had an empty office. It cost like 50 quid. We bought a terrible sofa and a nice throw and some cushions and a salt lamp. And you can book it online through a QR code, and you can go and just have 10 minutes, half an hour, whatever you need to step away. And I think that when you've been working in the industry for a number of years, that is really wonderful to see, because actually it does become a hamster wheel. And as we've all said, you know, educating parents that you can make a career is one thing, certainly, because you really can, but also allowing the industry to let people have careers, but also have some semblance of a life outside would be, yeah, is probably one of the biggest challenges. And I would say currently, you know, one of the areas is definitely new parents. It's a real shame, actually.
Okay, thanks, Katie. And Sita, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd add to what Katie said. I think it's doing small but really powerful things. First of all, new parents, carers, those who've got caring responsibilities, help them. Those who are mid-tier and who feel stuck, put an arm out and see what you can do to help them progress. Transferers, you know, make this industry, because we're talking about mid-tier, right? We have significant shortages in areas like, say, logistics. People from the army can move in, or accountants. You can get people from other sectors to move in. How do you make this place more welcoming at the mid-tier? Because they then will make the change happen. I say to people I work with and who actually have benefited from some of the things we do, you are the change makers, because you're the one who's going to be ricocheting the change when you employ people. So I think change at the mid-tier is so important. Mid and senior, they become so powerful.
And how do you kind of increase diversity within that space, with that mid-senior level, and also make people feel that they are, you know, important, valued, part of the fabric and not invisible?
I mean, I come back to the point of mainstreaming it. So anything we do, which is a stepping up program, and these are all skills, they're not diversity initiatives, they're skills initiative. So for example, if you want, I'm going to give you an example in unscripted, not scripted. We've got an intervention called series producer, because there's a massive lack of series producer. It's a skills shortage. Up to now, we've done 115 series producers. A significant proportion of them happen to be inclusive because of the way we recruited, found the people, bootcamp them, and many of them have gone on to become commissioners working for key broadcasters in the UK. Similarly, we've got another one, which is entirely again about skills. It's unscripted and it's called Leaders of Tomorrow, a 3-year, and Stephen made the point, invest, a 3-year intervention helping people step up across different craft grades, but with that scaffolding of support. I think there are people, they often get overlooked. Katie made the point about hiring who you know. It's genuinely looking beyond your nose and thinking just because he or she hasn't spoken up, doesn't have the polish, the confidence, doesn't mean they can't do a good job. Help them flower. I think there are plenty of people around. I refuse to believe there aren't. It's about giving them the opportunity.
And Stephen, you were quoted as saying invest, invest, invest. So how can we invest in these people?
Well, I believe in the concept of, if you can see it, you can be it. If you can see it, you can be it. And I think, Sita, you mentioned we want to look to diversify both the middle management and the leadership level. But one of the biggest, I guess, excuses that I hear a lot is that, you know, we just don't have many, we only have so many voices or roles around the leadership table. You know, I can't get rid of this person over here because she's a top performer. Can't get rid of this person over here because he's been here for 25 years. And certainly I completely understand that. And I'm not asking our leaders to replace a voice at the table. But the concept that I lean into is this concept of make the table bigger. Include more voices to those that are already existing. You know, many times people think of diversity as being the zero-sum game. If this person wins, it must be at the expense of someone else. Or if this person is given an opportunity, we're taking an opportunity away from someone else. And that's not true. It's if we can provide equal opportunity and access to everyone wins. And so we're not asking you to replace a chair around the table. Keep that chair there. Just make the table bigger and allow for more chairs to be under the table. And I think that's going to help us with getting those voices and those faces around the table. And then for others to be able to see that is such an important concept.
Thank you, Stephen. And Wilma, how do we then engage the leadership to make sure that they commit to this and they make it happen throughout the whole organisation? I keep coming back to this business as usual, but how does it become a fabric of everything we do?
I think there's something around, it's a skill. To be inclusive is a skill. It's not something that you can wish upon people. So back to the conversation that Sita started around skills. We have we have an obligation as organizations to invest in learning how to be inclusive. So there's a whole kind of theory and practice around being allies. So if you are not from that community that you want to bring in, how can you be an ally and a champion of those voices? And if you are, and you've made it to the top or to the middle or whatever, how can you champion? How can you role model for others? These are things that have now become a lot more mainstream, and certainly we're investing a lot more in this. But there's absolutely something around making the table bigger. I'm so pleased that Stephen said this. There's also something around how do we define talent, because if we define talent or quality or excellence in the same way that we've done for 200 years, then some people, however much we offer to polish or to, they'll never make it, because the definition was always so tied to exclude. So unless we change the definitions of what talent is, how you see quality, how you define excellence, we're not going to be able to crack this.
Stephen, I liked what you said about, if you can see it, you can be it. And, and what can we do? And I'm a comms person, so I can ask this. What can we do to make sure that people do see it? Katie, what's your view on that?
Do you know what? I actually heard the most amazing conversation of the day between three younger women, and they were talking about the role models of Disney princesses and which one they had identified with when they were children, and the ones that they see now, when you look at like Mirabelle and Encanto and all of those things, and this young lady was saying, oh, Mulan was the only real one that she had to sort of look up to as a sort of difference. And I think what's amazing is, going back to what Stephen said, if you can see it, you can be it. And that is, I think for the younger generation, really important.
Yeah.
And it is really important to get those seats at the table, but it's also really crucial that when those people are given the seat at the table, that they are also given the right to speak, and their opinion is sought, and their opinion is valued, and their opinion is bought in. Because I think sometimes, and that's where, I hate the word tokenism, but that is where sometimes the tokenism element of society and the setup comes in quite a lot. And I think, sorry, that conversation just sat in my mind. And when you were saying that you can see it, if you see it, you can be it. And I was like, yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, thank you for noticing. Thank you for noticing, Katie. I think over the last several years, there's been a very deliberate and intentional effort from our company to make sure that we're getting away from the princess being rescued by Prince Charming and happily ever after. And we're looking at how do we further leverage the creativity of diverse storytellers to bring more real and representative characters and stories to the screen. If you think, just over the last year, even, you've had Soul from Pixar, featuring a Black character. You had, Shang-Chi, The Legend of the Ten Rings, an Asian superhero. You had strong female leads that are leading our efforts, from Raya and the Last Dragon, Mulan, Frances McDormand in Nomadland, Emma Stone in Cruella, Emily Blunt in Jungle Cruise. These are just examples of we're bringing these characters to life in meaningful ways. And it's because we have now, creative leadership and a workforce that represents those audiences, and they're able to bring those stories to life. So thank you, Katie, for noticing. It's very deliberate and intentional that we're bringing these different princesses and stories. Yeah.
But it is also very interesting. And one of the examples I use about representation of disability on screen, and it's like more historically, is often in a film who the baddie is because they have a facial scar. And that's one of those sort of out of date tropes that we often see, and that I really hope the more, as I say, the more difference there is around the table and in our crews and on our sets, the less that will be an acceptable thing of, oh, they have a limp, they're going to be the bad guy, or oh, they just got burnt, and they're going to be they're definitely going to be the bad guy. And it goes back to when I was a kid watching Scar and The Lion King. Like it's that sort of level of exposure that I think is changing, and it's really lovely to see.
You just wait. I mean, I can't give it away, but we have other characters that are going to be coming out soon, featuring other dimensions of diversity, whether it's our LGBTQ population, whether it's our deaf community, whether it's our disabled community. I mean, all of these communities are going to be featured because we now have people that represent those communities telling real stories. And I'm really excited about what's going to be ahead, and our audiences being able to lean in even more into our characters and stories.
That's fantastic. What else can we do, Sita, to avoid that kind of tokenism? That, I love the idea of more seats around the table, but I can't bear the thought of, right, we need a gay person, let's have a disabled person and a black person. Fine, tick tick tick, done all the boxes. So what can we do to make sure it's genuine?
Yeah, I think one of the most encouraging, inspiring things I've seen since COVID actually is how people are speaking up. I mean, I belong to a generation where I was utterly grateful for anything I was given, like breadcrumbs. But what I love is actually people are asking, demanding. I think that's powerful. It's inspiring. And I think, frankly, it's that and the storytelling that Stephen's talking about. It's seeing shows like Black Panther, it's I May Destroy You, television and film doing its magic and helping people feel that they have a voice, that they can sit at the table, and also in some cases, and I appreciate your point, Stephen, about more seats at the table, but sometimes I think someone's got to chair the table, and that person may end up being someone different, and that's good.
Yeah.
And how can we teach the students and the young people, coming back to them again, that's what they can expect? That's going to be that's how life's going to be. How can we get them to believe us that that's the case? Wilma, what do you think?
I'll flip this. I think we're learning from them. I'm in absolute awe of young people. I have an 11-year-old, and some of the conversations I hear between him and his friends and how they call each other out. I hear this when they're gaming, they're playing games online, and I can hear the conversation and what he said. And they say, you can't say this. This is sexist. And these are 11-year-old boys who the world is placing quite a lot on them right now. So I think there's something around absolutely looking at them and believing them and trusting them, and then taking our cues from them, but also helping them, because there are skills in adult life that they don't have and we have, and we need to teach them. So yeah, and that's kind of my hope, really.
So I was going to ask everybody what their hope is. That's your hope for the future. Katie, what's your hope for the future?
I have two hopes, totally selfishly, that I don't have to think about accessibility when I go to work and plan everything around it, and that it's thought about and integrated from the get-go. And I think my second hope is, thinking about like Wilma's 11-year-old son, my second hope is that we can step up and show the next generation how brilliant we can be and how much they should be excited about. Because I think you're completely right. The conversations that we overhear are so different to the worlds that we grew up in, and so wonderful. And I really hope that they, in 10 years time, Wilma's son is directing the next Star Wars, and making sure that kick-ass leads are fully represented from society, all of them screens, And I think that's really a hope that the next generation don't necessarily have to worry and don't necessarily have to kick down the door and beat the drum like we have to. I think that's, yeah, my hope.
Peter, what's your hope for the future?
My hope is actually not dissimilar to Katie's. I think two things. All of us as human beings have a primeval desire to belong. I think all of us love storytelling. The magic of storytelling is ingrained. So for everyone to feel they too can play a part in weaving that magic, in telling that story, to me, that is so powerful.
And your hope, Stephen?
I said this before. My hope is to work myself out of a job, to no longer need diversity, equity, and inclusion teams, because this work is built into the way we do business, is built into the fabric of organizations. So that's certainly a hope. And for me also, I have 3 small boys, and for them to be able to see not only themselves in characters and stories on screen, but to see others that are different from them, where they can learn and they can develop that sense of empathy and sense of understanding for different cultures. Is something that is a hope of mine as well. And I know and I understand the power that my company and my brand bring, the brand that I work for brings. And being able to be a part of that is just humbling, and it's something that means the world to me. So, yeah.
Thank you. So we've talked about, we've talked a lot about the issues and, you know, what there still is to be done. However, whether you're in creative education, you're in TV, you're in films, you're in animation, you know, it's a great place to be. So one word of advice that you would give to a young person that was thinking about coming into any part of this industry in which we all work, what would your one piece of advice be to them? Wilma, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, gosh. I don't know if I can do brevity like this. I'll use more than one word. I can't just do one
Well, it
word.
doesn't have to be one word. I meant one phrase or one.
I like Sita's speak up and challenge, but also look after yourself, because there's sometimes difficulties and challenges and price to pay for doing that. So have enough networks around you that will hold you, but do speak up and challenge.
Thank you, Wilma. What about you, Katie? What's your one piece of advice?
Oh, I have about 6 rules that the team I work with know about. So that's quite difficult to narrow down. I think if I was giving anyone advice, I would say enjoy it. Like, if you're lucky enough to work in this industry, it is ridiculously fun. It's tough, it's hard. But as I say to everybody, you know, if somebody starts getting a bit overwhelmed, at the end of the day, it's pictures on a screen. That's it. You know, you're not saving lives. You're not flying into space. It's pictures on a screen. And I think maintaining that perspective can really help you. It can really help you speak up when somebody is not treating you so well. It can really help you maintain that work-life balance. It's pictures on a screen, but really fun to make.
What's your one piece of advice, Stephen?
I guess for me, it would, be fearless. I mean, think big, dream big. If you look at the company, if you look at my company, Walt Disney as a company, I mean, we touch every aspect of media and entertainment. But the company started with a mouse. Our founder was just a visionary, and he dreamed big, he thought big, and that's something I'd encourage everyone. Be bold, be brave, be courageous, think big, dream big. There's if your dreams don't scare you, you're not dreaming big enough. I think that was something that I've read, and I love that saying. So that'll be my piece of advice.
Thank you. And Sita?
I think Stephen put it so brilliantly. So I would just say to anybody, if you really want to work in our industry, believe in yourself. It may not be easy, but what is worthwhile, that is easy. And go for it, because there's more help that's available than you think there is. And remember, there are people who forge the way ahead of you, so you will make it, no problem.
Thank you. Have you got any questions you'd like to ask each other? Oh,
I cannot give any secrets around Black Panther 2. I cannot share any secrets.
I'm glad I mentioned it, Stephen, because I thought it was super cool.
I think I had an observation, and I think Stephen can tell us if this is true or not. I think it is, but we haven't talked about sort of profit and success. You know, companies and organizations who do better on this area do better financially as well. So I don't, you know, I can't for a minute believe that a company like Disney doesn't look at it. It's morally the right thing to do, and of course we should do it for that. But we also know that there's a hungry audience out there, and therefore, if one wanted arguments like you asked me, Julie, about how you talk to the people in the middle or at the top around, you know, why it's worth doing this, there is a very strong argument around that type of success as well. You reach more people, you know. Yeah.
Wilma, I've mentioned I've been in the D&I space for over a decade, and I remember starting out in this space. You had to build a business case. You had to
business case for diversity,
for why this work is important. I think over the last several years, and I think Sita, you mentioned Black Panther, Coco, you know, Shang-Chi, Raya, even Encanto. I mean, these are all movies that feature underrepresented communities, but we're making these films for all audiences, and they're killing it. They're doing so well. So we don't need to make a business case anymore. You know, there's no business case that needs to be made. You know, all audiences want to see these characters, these stories, and other industries, I think, are taking note that you know, you don't have to focus on one particular community. If you focus on all communities, all audiences want to be brought into that. So so the days of building a business case around why this work is important, I think, are over. It's just making sure that we're telling those real, authentic, truly genuine stories, because those communities that we're featuring, they're savvy enough to know when it's not true.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure we're getting it right for all audiences.
Absolutely. Great. Okay, that's been absolutely fantastic. It's been a really, really interesting debate and conversation. And thank you all so much for all your kind of honesty and insights, and for making me laugh and making each other laugh as well, which we've really enjoyed. So we'll send you some details about the festival and when this is going to be going out and everything. So tell your friends, tell anyone that will listen. And thank you all so much. And I'll be in touch with all of you. Thanks
Nice
so much.
to meet you all.
So nice to meet you all.
Thanks.